They say music feeds the soul and food feeds the heart. So please join us for season 2 of Brunch with a Black Man, where we sit down with Black men from across the world who talk about their experiences with mental health, mental wellness, and how they are taking on their own mental health journey. We sit down over brunch to break it down. Make sure you join us for season 2 of Brunch with a Black Man. Hello, and welcome to another edition of Brunch with the Black Man. I am your host, Miracle Jones, and we are sitting down with the lovely, amazing Nick Pressley. So welcome to Brunch with the Black Man.
Thanks for having me.
I'm very excited. Like, you're one of my favorite people because you're always just like so kind and like so chill, and I'm always like resonated with that. So I'm very happy we get to have you here.
The feeling's mutual. And so when you reached out to me, you said, Nick, you want me to put you in front of a camera, and then you said the word brunch. It's like I said, I'm here.
Love brunch. But is this kind of like, I know you said earlier, like brunch was like your favorite meal. Like, how did you fall in love with brunch?
So, you know, I was raised in the military, lots of getting up early, working in restaurants for a long time, opening restaurants. I love breakfast food, but I hate getting up early. so I love breakfast food, but not at breakfast time. And so brunch is like the natural midway. I'm naturally a night owl, and so when I stay up late, and then I get up at noon, and then someone wants to feed me some amazing, eggs and sausage or pancakes or waffles, I'm gonna stop. But yeah, I'm there.
You said you grew up a military brat. So did you move around a lot?
Yes, I was born in Fort Gordon, Georgia. And then every 2 years, I moved to a new spot. DC, then Germany. I started school in West Germany. I was in Germany when the wall was still there. And I was there when the wall came down. And then we moved back to the States at the start of Desert Shield, Desert Storm, so the first Iraq War. And I've been back in the United States ever since.
So what was it like for you to move from like place to place? Like, yes, we know there's military brats, but like you are moving, you're growing up, there's like hip hop culture happening. So like, what is that experience like for you?
It's interesting because I was not directly connected with my blackness as a part of the military. When I was being raised, my mother is white, my father was black. We were raised to everyone was green. In the Army, everyone was green, right? And so it wasn't until, minus a couple small episodes that I can look back on now and recognize, oh, that was an instance of having to navigate blackness. I didn't have to deal with it until we moved back to the United States. My mother got discharged, etc. And so, a couple of things. I never had roots. I don't have childhood friends. I don't have people I've known since I was a child. And so I've had to kind of make new friends everywhere I've gone, which is part of the reason I love to meet new people and I like to engage with new folks. And then the other thing is that it gave me the opportunity to recreate myself regularly. So every 2 years, I got to look at the previous 2 years' experience to say, oh, what worked and what didn't? Did people like me? Did people not like me? And then kind of come back as a new persona each time. And I think that served me in many ways because now I can really integrate into almost any group or community or neighborhood I'm in. But at the same time, it's been a challenge to kind of identify who is the real Nick Pressley.
You talk about like you're moving around, you're kind of like a chameleon. Who do you go to then for like advice to ask and talk about the world? Because there is no like long-term stability because the 2 years are gonna go.
Yeah, I haven't had a lot of people, and it hasn't been until my adulthood that I really started to kind of attract and have those kind of people gravitate to me. Nowadays, I've got some cadre of really close friends. It's interesting because one of my closest friends right now is a guy that I met the last time I lived in Philly, which was 10 years ago. And I didn't realize the kind of effect I had on his life and how much my friends miss me until I moved back, And so for a long time, I didn't consider myself having very many close friends. I did not have anyone to go talk to. And a little bit about my life story. There's a lot of jail time in my 20s there, and I kind of attribute that to lack of having anyone to look up to.
Right, so, you're finding yourself, you're moving around. At what point does art and music kind of like wrap its arms around you and be like, it's okay, you don't have other people, you got art.
Oh yeah, that's probably what got me through a lot of the hardship. It's always been there. My family was a sports family. My father and my brothers were both were all athletes, but I was not. I was the artsy kid, storytelling, painting, poetry. But it was in college at Penn State that it really started to take off. I was by myself. I had kind of disowned my family, and they disowned me at that point in time. And I had met some friends who were involved in the music business, and they were involved in artistry and writing poetry, and they encouraged me to kind of explore that part of myself, and realize first off that poems don't have to rhyme. And that kind of took the shackles off, and I started writing all the time. And then I wanted to put the poetry to beats, only I didn't want to do the typical hip hop beats. And so I started writing poetry to Pink Floyd tracks and Tool tracks and dubstep and drum and bass. Dubstep didn't exist back then. Drum and bass tracks. And the next thing you know, I became kind of an MC. And in the local bar scene at Penn State, there were bands that would play, college bands. And if they saw me in the crowd, they knew that I was a rhymer, and they would call me up on stage and go into a jam, and I would just freestyle over their stuff. And so it was at that point I really started to kind of recognize that music had a spot in my life. But it's always been there. It's always been there.
And so you're at Penn State, you're living it up, you're this, the creative kid on campus, you're forming your own identity.
Yes.
And then, like you alluded to earlier, you run into some incarceration time.
Yes.
How was that experience for you? Because I couldn't imagine finally being yourself, being free, putting down your own roots, and then that is just almost stripped from you.
Completely derailed. My father was murdered when I was a sophomore in college. I didn't handle it well, going back to the fact that I had no one to talk to. I didn't even know how to reach out for help. And so I kind of imploded, and a lot of the stuff that I was writing about, which by the way was conscious hip hop, reaching towards evolution, aspiration of enlightenment, and what that looks like for human beings, all of that kind of ground to a halt. When I found myself incarcerated, I stopped writing. And I hadn't written anything creative until last year. Now, I was first incarcerated in 2004, and so we're talking 20 years it took me to start writing again. And people have always asked me, well, what did you do with all that creative energy? And I like to tell them that I turned that into advocacy work later down the road, but for a long period of time, there just was no outlet. And it was kind of, I think I learned something that every artist knows, is that we don't produce art for other people. We produce art because if we don't, we may implode.
And so as you're going through life, you're not creating art, you're trying not to implode. What skills or techniques are you developing to express yourself, to deal with your frustrations, and to articulate your feelings?
Honestly, I turned to spirituality. And I grew up in a very religious household. My father was Baptist. My mother was actually raised Jehovah's Witness. And I rejected religion. And I rejected the rules and strictures that religion put around spirituality. When I was incarcerated, though, I discovered that you can be spiritual without being religious. And it was through that type of embracing that innate spirituality that I was able to kind of navigate some of this turmoil that was within me. And then when I started seeing what in my mind was a response from the universe to that kind of outreach, that's when I really started to grasp hold of it. And I still, maintain that to this day in various ways. You see the crystals and stuff like that. I am that woo-woo crystal guy. I've been reading tarot cards since I was 17. So I've been kind of that weird spiritual person for a long time. And now I'm in a space where kind of learning that my artistry was transmuted into spirituality, and now transmuting back both of them together now to this art.
So you found a way to express yourself, to be yourself, and to put your skills and your art together. on like this path and journey of self-discovery, what was the thing that was like most shocking to you? Because like you said, you didn't realize you could be religious and not spiritual, and now you're like, oh, I could do that. Like it doesn't have to be this box. So what has been some of the lessons that you've learned on this journey?
Honestly, might sound a little cheesy. It's the power of faith. I fear nothing anymore. I'm not afraid of death. I don't think death is the end. I'm not afraid of making mistakes. I look back at my life now, and some of the mistakes that I thought were going to end my life or were the most devastating have inevitably and in every single case held the seeds to my greatest salvation or my greatest victories. I live comfortably now. I have a very good job. I have a job that I consider to be very important to humankind, and civil rights, and I'm very proud of where I've come from, and that's why I'm able to own my past mistakes. And I have this job, I have this career, I have this ability to pursue art and spirituality in the way that I do, because I have faith that no matter what it looks like right now, it's gonna work out. And it does always work out, as one of my favorite bands says, Wookie Foot says, in the end, it's all okay. And if it's not okay, it's not the end. And I really live by that. And it comes true every day.
You said talking about some of like your challenges and mistakes. We don't have to get into the nitty gritty of those details, but how was that experience for you? Because like you said, you went through incarceration, you came home, went through it again, and you had some news and press. So how was that for you? Because I couldn't really imagine like going through that once, let alone twice.
Yeah, my self-esteem was shattered. I thought that I was broken. I thought that there was no way to fix me, no way to save me. I thought that there was something fundamentally wrong with me. And it was actually a prison guard who said to me, Pressley, the only difference between me and you is that you got caught and I didn't. Like, we're the same person. And kind of really helped me reframe and reshape the way in which I viewed myself. And once I started realizing that, okay, I may be injured, and it was because of the way in which I looked at myself while injured and that I was unable to heal, that I continued to be injured, right? That I was, once I realized that I was not some broken automaton and that I was able to be fixed, then I was able to find ways to fix myself. I have a tattoo on my leg of the minor Hindu goddess Akalandeshwari, and she's the goddess who's never not broken. And the idea is that she is constantly fracturing and falling apart, and it is through the constant putting herself back together again that she is able to strive towards enlightenment and strive towards being a benefit to mankind. And that is honestly the way in which I've lived. Anything that feels negative in your life is really an opportunity to strive towards the positive. Both negative and positive experiences are necessary for humankind to move forward and evolve or reach towards spirituality. And you can't have one without the other. But you have to recognize that when it rains, the sun's gonna come out someday. But that for every period of sunshine, there's inevitably a period of rain. And when you accept that both of those parts are equally valid, then you realize that life will continue on and that there's always a way forward.
And you talk about life continuing on. One of the things you've been really vocal about in the past couple of years is like this festival.
Yes. Like
the arts and the creatives like coming together intentionally.
Yes.
What attracted you to like experiencing festivals? And then you like, I'm gonna kind of do this more intentionally.
Yeah, my youngest brother passed away from drug overdose in 2021, and that threatened to kind of derail my life again as I was navigating that. And a friend of mine invited me to attend a festival with her in the middle of Ohio, okay? In like rural Ohio. As someone who navigates, race-related issues in a political realm, that was a little scary. I went out there to this festival where I didn't know anyone, and they treated me like family. And I looked around, and it was a family. There were children running around. The music was all about, how we come together and forget the things that make us different from each other. And I just felt this sense of belonging. We call it PLUR in the festival and rave scene, which, peace, love, unity, respect. And it's real. And I see it everywhere I go, and most festivals I go to are festivals I go to with looking for that in mind. And it just fascinated me. And then I also noticed that as I bring people in, more people, it kind of activates us and shows us that if a stranger can accept me as family, then why can't I accept other strangers as family? And we create this sense of coming together that transcends political bounds, transcends race, transcends educational background or what have you. And then you get to see beautiful pieces of art and people like really like shining, as I like to say. And I'll tell you what, it was at this festival, Pyro, in Ohio. I've never seen so many mixed people in one place in my life. And I, as a mixed person, it felt like home.
And so now you go to these different festivals, building and creating community.
Yes.
Have you found that has given you the ability to have that outlet of like, these are the feelings that I'm experiencing, but this is how I can like voice what I need to be better?
Yeah, 100%. And I found as well that there are millions of different ways to express that creative outlet, right? At these festivals, there are numerous different examples of art styles and art flow. I'm now into fire dancing and flow props, and just the beautiful synergy of what that looks like when you're dancing like that. And then I also get to see all kinds of mixing of genres. When I was rapping in college, I rapped a lot about evolution and spirituality, and no one cared. But now there's a whole subgenre of conscious hip hop, and then there's a subgenre of conscious hip hop alongside EDM or alongside reggae or roots music. And so it's just really shown me that art is spirit and that there are myriad ways for it to express itself.
And you talked about how you lost your brother, and my condolences to you, and how it almost derailed your life. Have you gone about finding like your triggers and the things that almost put you back in those circumstances? Because I think that's one of the key parts of healing. Because you said we break, we fall apart, we got to get back together. But understanding like when we're about to break and making sure we're able to put ourselves back together, I think is a really interesting skill to develop. So how has that worked for you?
I mean, I needed help. The organization I worked for at the time, my old mentor, Mark Steer, came to me after Cameron passed and said, Nick, our health insurance covers mental health. And I had never actively looked for mental health help at that point. That wasn't court mandated. And so I did. And I found a fantastic therapist who I was able to find one who embraced my spiritual, holistic, worldview. And we've been working together for a number of years now. And she's actually based out of Pittsburgh. And we've been working together since 2021 on identifying these triggers at my own pace. And so what I really learned was that it is okay to ask for help. And that when you do ask for help, that's usually when it shows up, and then also that you have to take charge of your own healing. Like I learned that a little bit when I was incarcerated, but I didn't understand how to kind of navigate and look for those pieces. But it was one thing that Cameron's death showed me was that it's out there when you look for it, and that it can be beneficial. And there's nothing to be ashamed of. In fact, I am a firm and staunch advocate. Everyone should be in therapy because, in all honesty, the very first experience of any human being on this planet is one of the most traumatic. The experience of being born is traumatizing AF. And so, I think we all need it.
And you said that was the first time you sought support out of court-mandated support. Have you looked at what is outside of your willingness to get assistance? Have you found there is a difference between the types of support that's provided to people when you look voluntarily versus when the court is mandating it?
Oh yeah, I mean, the courts like to do. Our political system likes to do these things we call unfunded mandates, which is they demand you do this or that, but they won't put money towards it. And in this world, you can say, hey, you have to go to the group counseling or group therapy, but you're gonna be met with a counselor or therapist who, God bless their heart, is trying their hardest, but they've got a caseload of 60 people. My therapist doesn't have that. You know what I mean? And she's able to give me personalized attention. And because of that, I felt like I was able to get, attention that is catered to my unique circumstances, my unique personality, my unique identity. And that's been a world of difference. I don't feel like I'm just a number or a case number or a study. I feel like I'm actually an individual. And I think that the lack of ready mental health care in this country is both premeditated and the reason why we've got so many problems, both with regards to crime or with regards to poverty or with regards to any kind of issues that we're facing today.
And you said you're of the mindset that everyone should go to therapy.
100%.
What has been your favorite part about therapy?
Realizing how not unique I am. I used part of the part of what keeps you unhealthy is the shame of being unhealthy mentally. And you think, oh my God, like I said, I'm this broken piece of machinery. While everyone else around me seems to get it, I can't seem to get it. But then with therapy and kind of navigating some of the work we've had to do, we also call it shadow work in spirituality. Navigating some of the shadow work, you realize that actually that's a part of the human condition. We all come into this world, as I mentioned, with this period of a certain amount of trauma. And honestly, this world is built on both positive and negative experiences, which are both necessary, as I just said. And so recognizing that your experience of negativity and the way in which you internalize it doesn't make you unique or broken, it makes you normal, then helps you realize that, okay, then I can get healthy and I can be helped.
Which is very, very powerful. So I think sometimes, like you said, the society, it's intentional, but it also makes you feel like once you made a mistake, like no one is going to be there for
Yes.
you. Like it's like the end of the world. So were you surprised after you went through what you went through that you still had a whole community of people who are supporting you and there for you?
Very much so. And to be honest, we're growing. The United States for a long time, and I think still does maintain their rank as the most incarcerated country in the world. And in fact, Pennsylvania, if it were its own country, would be the second most incarcerated country in the world, fifth highest rate in the United States as of several years ago. And so we are continually inflicting the terror and pain and incarceration upon the people. The cadre is just growing. And while back in the 80s and early 90s, there was this sense, and it still maintains itself to this day, that once a criminal, always a criminal, when we realize that we are creating criminals. If there's one thing that America has continued to grow, is the laws in the books and more ways to become a criminal. And so as we kind of realize that we're creating these criminals, those of us who are fully incarcerated, have been through the carceral system, are starting to band together. And as we heal, then we're healing now, not just on our own, we're healing in community. And in our presence allows other people that courage to be like, hey, maybe I'm not this unique, broken little snowflake, and I'm a normal person who's undergoing a normal human experience, and that there are ways in which I can use my personal experience to help other people who are doing so.
And you said the healing journey. What does being healed look like to you? Right? 'Cause I think there's like no one standard of healing.
Sure.
Right? We're all different. We all have different experiences. So what does healing look like to you?
Well, first off, you're never healed. Just like Akko and Deshri, we're never not broken, right? And the healing journey is accepting the fact that there's always something for you to work on. For me, it's been navigating a series of personality diagnoses or mental health disorders over the course of my life. And so always recognizing that there is a way in which I can be more in harmony with me, my community, and the natural world around me. And always trying to find out what that looks like, both internally and in recognizing that the more I work on the best thing I can do for this planet and for humanity is to work on myself. And the more I work on myself internally, then the more my external experience of the world changes, I dare say that there are things that happen to me today that if they were to happen to me 10 years ago, I would have taken and handled so much differently. And as a result of the ways in which I am not reacting to the world or responding to the world, then my experience of the world around me has been much easier to navigate.
What is a tool that helps you to react or respond differently?
There's a couple. First is mindfulness, which is probably the hardest and one that I'll be working on. It was the first lesson my therapist and I talked about. The first thing you learn when you start learning how to meditate or any type of spiritual journey. And what that is when I had anger issues when I was younger. And what that would look like would be something would happen that would trigger me, and then I would spark, and then I was off to the races. If I can capture that spark, if I can catch myself when something sparks or triggers me and I'm like, oh God, that hurts, and then stop myself or recognize, oh, hey, that hurts, and then examine the cause of that pain. Why am I feeling this way? Before just letting it carry me away, then that will change the outcome entirely. And one of the things you do when you're able to kind of capture that is we call it HALT method. First, I check and see, am I upset because I am hungry? Am I upset because I'm angry? Am I lonely? Or am I tired? And if any of those four things are going on, then I can't figure out how to solve the issue until I navigate that first. If I'm hungry, I need to eat, And once I've eaten, then I can go back and be like, okay, now was that really a big deal? And oftentimes I'll see that it wasn't as intense as it was, as I had originally felt it. And then I'm able to react differently and respond differently, and then the outcome's different, and then my external world has been changed.
Yeah, I think that it's always the hardest, that taking a step back and breathing, because you're like so used to reacting. Like, okay, was that intentional? Was that like directed at me? Was it trying to hurt me? Right? And then if you don't have that step, you're just like, oh, okay. Then you have to pull, put the train back, on the tracks a little bit. And so, like, as you're out here navigating this new journey and creating new art and developing this music community, but also this larger cadre of people impacted by the criminal justice system, have you been able to see like overlays and all these communities that you're creating, and what have they been?
Oh, 100%. Some of the best artists I've ever met are either currently incarcerated or formerly incarcerated. There's a huge overlap. Art is often a representation of some sort of internal pain or externalized understanding of pain. And so, there's a lot of pain within the criminal justice system. And there's a lot of the only ways in which some folks know how to communicate that pain is through art. Because language isn't always able to encapsulate. There's not really a word for the pain that I felt when the doors closed on the jail cell and I realized that I fucked up again. But there's a picture that can be drawn, or there's a musical note that can kind of capture that. And so there's absolutely some kind of overlap. I think music and art is its own, and in fact, science backs that up. Singing occupies a different part of your brain than speech, And so there's absolutely an overlay. I think leaning into that and identifying how to kind of bring that out of individuals more could be a key towards helping us navigate all the pain in the world today.
I think it's a lot. It's either art or anger for a lot of folks.
Yes.
It's like trying to tell people you would take that anger and channel it into art is something that I think a lot of people, like you said, would benefit from. So like as you're out here, you talked about the pain of that door shutting, but now you have the responsibility to make sure that other people know that even if that door happens, there's like a window that they can go through.
That's right.
How does that feel for you?
It's empowering. I feel like I've been given an opportunity to help folks who find themselves in a position that I was in when I had no one to help me. The first couple of times I was incarcerated, I was not in contact with my family very much. They lived 1,000 miles away, in Florida, and I was in Pennsylvania. I didn't have anyone visiting me. I didn't have anyone writing me. I felt the most alone I'd ever felt in my life. And now I'm in a position to show people that, hey, you can come back from that. And that even if you feel alone, there's people out there who care about you. And even more, because of myself and other formerly incarcerated leaders across the state and across the country, we're coming together and we're gaining power, and we're creating intentional communities so that we can create that safety net for the folks like us. It's a responsibility. It's one I take very seriously, and one that I'm honored to be a part of.
So one of the things I always like watching you work is like when we're in legislative meetings, and you're just gonna be like, no, let me tell you what this impact does.
Yes.
Right? How did you feel comfortable in using your voice in those positions and places of power? Because a lot of times people are just excited to be in the room, right? You're excited, be in the room where it happens, right? You're excited to be in the room, you're excited at the table, and you kind of shrink.
Yes.
You happy to be in the room, thankful to be at the table, but you're like, I'm going to use it for a reason. So what was that like for you to be able to like use your voice? And like, what did you have to tell yourself to be like, I'm not just going to be happy to be in this room?
I had to remember that these people are people like us, I'm sitting across from a legislator who we may disagree on a lot of things. This person may think they're superior to me because of a different background, because they had never been incarcerated. But when I know the statistics, I know oftentimes what the cause of incarceration is. And I said it earlier, I'm of the firm opinion that there is an intentional keeping of people in survival mode that is the root cause of crime. Poverty and wealth and income disparity is the root cause of crime. Any study will tell you that. And it's been intentional that this has been the case. Even all the way back to Bacon's Rebellion, when they told poor white people, they gave poor white people a little bit more rights than they gave poor black people so that they could divide us. And recognizing all of this history, recognizing this man across is not better than me, he just had a different upbringing, then I see him as an equal. Even if he doesn't see me as an equal, I see him or her as an equal, and then I can speak to them from that manner. And recognizing again that if I'm not going to do it, then who's going to do it, right? Frankly, it's because I don't know if I can swear.
Yeah.
I don't give a fuck about that person. I don't give a fuck who they think they are. I know that if I'm in this room, it's my responsibility to speak for people who cannot be in the room. And I also don't care what people think of me anymore because I've been through hell. I mean, that's why I can dress the way I dress. That's why I can be as audacious as I am. Authenticity is I could say authenticity is my calling card. And because I don't give a fuck what this legislator thinks about me, I'm able to speak to him as if I don't give a fuck what he thinks about me. And it's born true because, look, I have never lost a job because of it. In fact, people value that.
I always say that like when you're going through it, it's like the worst in the world. But once you realize you've gone through something, you have this armor, and you're like, I kind of can survive stuff.
And he may not be able to survive that.
Yeah, it was like, wait a minute, I'm kind of stronger than I thought it was. And I think that like for you, your story is one that of not only survival, but like there's second, third, and fourth chances, and you have to go through things till you figure it out.
That's right.
And you just need time and space to be able to figure it out. And like, okay, this is what worked for me, this is what didn't. And it's not the most conventional way, but I figured it out.
And if you look at history, some of my heroes, Morgan Freeman didn't get his first great acting gig after he was 50. I'm 41, right? And so, a lot of this idea that you only have a certain amount of time to get things right, you only have one life. Sure, there's a certain truth to it, but the fact of the matter is, as I saw in my youth, with moving every 2 years in the military, you can recreate yourself to great effect at any point in time. Today, if I decide to make a change in my life, I can make a change in my life, I can completely shift my direction and, go and do a whole new career. And that is just as valid. And I like to say, and this is kind of an unpopular opinion, there are no mistakes, just redirections and lessons. And if I look at my life as like a series of lessons to be learned and redirections that come as a result of it. And through the power of therapy, I've been able to really look at some past situations in my life and that I thought, again, were the biggest mistakes and something I could never recover from, and realize that it was in every single one of those that there was a seeds of my greatest victory. I have a great job right now making, I pulled myself out of poverty, and I am able to do this because I went to jail 20 years ago.
And that is something that I think is great, because we think about collateral consequences. We kind of have this idea that you can't build yourself back up, but you're like, oh, I can do that. And I can do that being my authentic self. I can do that living my story. Tell people I made a mistake. And just also educating people along the way, because I think that's a huge part of the work. Not all of us are going to be incarcerated, but over 50% of the United States know someone who is incarcerated. And so if we share those stories, we take away that stigma, we take away that trauma, then we take away the embarrassment, and then we can fight, for these systems that actually give life instead of take life. And I think that that's really important. And so for you, as you're building, you're creating, are we going to see you performing at one of these festivals? Are we going to see an EP coming out? What's some of the things that you have on the horizon?
Oh my, I would love, yes. I'm trying to learn how to use digital audio workstation, a DAW. So I want to make EDM music. I want to make EDM music fused with hip hop and high vibe light codes. I got to teach myself how to do it or figure out a method of learning. I also know a lot of DJs, and through the political connections I've made over the years, I'm able to connect some of these artists with potential avenues for their exposure as well. I know a lot of artists of different types of artists, whether it's visual or audio, etc., and helping connect them. So I think being some sort of connector for other folks. But yes, an EP and some music is likely on the horizon. Give me about a year or so. I think 25 is going to be a very telling year for that. I'm toying with the idea of Pres Play as my stage name. So we'll see if that comes up. And not just that, I also painted for the first time in a decade last weekend and posted it on some social media, and everyone loved it. So we'll see if some sort of visual art would be a part of it. I think it's going to be a part of my life.
So what is it like for you now to not only experience art, but create art after this 20-year interruption?
It's a full circle moment, I thought that I wouldn't be able to do it again, and that I felt some sort of blockage inside. And while there are parts of that blockage that still exist, I guess, as I'm feeling out what I do and don't like, most of it's gone because I just also don't give a fuck what people think. So it's been really freeing. I'm really excited to see what happens. And I'm noticing that as I, continue to just kind of let go and release, then opportunities come in, to share that art and express myself in various ways.
You're talking about letting go and release. Outside of the art, what is the next 5 years? If you're planning, if your planning goes out, 5 years as you're living in the moment, what's on the horizon for, DJ Press Play or Nick Pressley?
Travel.
Okay.
Travel. Lots of travel. I don't know quite where. I know that, I have a lot of wanderlust, and sitting still has never been a part of my DNA. And so there's a lot of the world I want to see. I'm excited to get my passport for the first time in 30 years very soon, and kind of see what kind of trouble I can get into. I'd love to figure out a way to work internationally on civil rights in some way, as well as potentially some art projects, and really just finding ways to anchor the light into this world and be my authentic self to show other people that they can do the same, in whatever ways that means. Travel, lots of music, lots of loving, lots of caring.
Well, we wish you all the best with all of the travel, the music, the playing, and that has been this week with Brunch with the Black Man. Make sure you tune in next time. Thank you all so much. Thank you. I almost was like, this week. Wait, no, wrong show.